Okay, so this is the number 5 in the videos of PBR painting. Once again, I'm going to do it's a tutorial stroke walkthrough stroke messing around stroke learning as you go. It's not going to be set in stone, as it were, pardon the pun, but this was something I made, including the rock actually, it all in Blender using PBR Painter to texture it, and I thought it looked quite nice. I thought it gave me quite a realistic look. Yes, I know there are plenty of rocks you can get these days from photogrammetry rocks in Quixel, and even Blender has its own add-on for creating rocks, but I thought it looked quite nice and would be worth sharing if anyone is interested. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. Okay, so let's make a rock. Start with a cube, tab into edit mode, right click, subdivide 8 times, doesn't have to be 8 but 8 will do, select all and turn it into a sphere, dragging to the right. Once we've done that, tab back into object mode, right mouse click, smooth shade, and we can start by adding our first modifier, which is a displace modifier, and pop down to the texture mode here and create a new texture. Call this Voronoi, and we'll make this Voronoi, and we'll choose the distance squared. I find it works better for this particular example, and the intensity, drop it down ever so slightly, but the size, bracket up as high as it will go, and it will just play that a little bit. Go back to the the add modifier tab, the modifier tab, let's get it right, subdivision surface now, and just take that up a little bit. And now we're going to add the same displacement we added to start off with, and you'll see it flattens everything out. We get this quite nice kind of looking flat areas. It needs some work, but I think this is the basis for a good kind of looking rock, and quite a low poly rock as well. Not at the moment, but it will be. So the good thing I like about this is that if we tab back into edit mode and put displacement on, you'll see for object mode, for edit mode, you'll see that if we move this through the world space, we can change the shape of the rock, and it's really just about finding something that works quite well. Let's scale it up a little bit. I think that's pretty good. What I wanted something with these kind of like craggy sides, you know. Let's just try and make it a tiny bit bigger. That's a bit too much. Okay, I think that will do for now. So once we've got that, we just tab back into edit mode, and we're going to apply. In fact, we don't need to apply these modifiers because we're not actually going to use that. I'm going to leave that exactly where it is and just call that displace rock and keep that as it is, so that when I finish this I will package this whole scene and you can see exactly how I've done it, or we just use it. So from here we will rotate it. Actually, we're not going to do that just yet, I beg your pardon, beg your pudding. We're going to now create another mesh, cube mesh, and scale it up. It needs to enclose this whole area here. Once again, tab into edit mode, right mouse click, subdivide, and we'll subdivide this, let's do 10 times for this one, and you can do more or less 8 to 10, you know, I found works quite well. And once again, let's spherize it, and once that's there, we'll just tab into a wireframe mode so I can see, make sure that it's encapsulating the whole of my rock. Which it seems to be. And so from here we add the modifier, where are we, shrink wrap modifier, and we choose our displace rock here, and let's pop it on, and you can see there that it's shrink wrapped all the way around our rock. If I turn the displace rock off now, you'll see it's given us this quite nice shape, and I find this is a slightly better way of working because it gives us that kind of cragginess of the rock straight away. One of the reasons, one of the things I like using this particular method is because it gives me quite a nice UV map straight off the bat, as it were, because it's that sphere which comes, that kind of bog standard sphere that comes with, or cube shall I say, it comes with this nice UV map. It's not quite right, so I'm going to redo it now. Before I do that, let's just apply the shrink wrap modifier. Control and A, which is the same as apply. Now I can't apply it in edit mode, so I have to apply it here. Let's just smooth that again, shade smooth. Back to edit mode, and I'm going to use the outside here to create some UV borders. So I'm using Zen UV, but lots of other ones do this. Go mark seams by UV borders, and it creates these seams which almost worked. And there's a little bit of overlapping. Before I make my UV map, I just want to clean this up. So the easiest way I found is just to go into the sculpting tab and use the smooth modifier, put on wireframe just so you can see where it's working, and make sure the brush settings aren't too high, and just start to smooth out these areas just where the UVs, not the UVs, the vertices are starting to sort of smish together, so unsmish them. You could probably get away with it without doing this, if I'm honest with you, because most of what we're going to do in the PBR Painter is procedural, and so it doesn't really rely too much on how the UVs are laid out, but it's always good to have. It's always good to have some nice UVs. And there you go. For a few seconds worth of work, it should give us some nice UVs. So now select all, and UV, unwrap, and I like to use subdivision surfaces, even though I haven't got subdivision surface on. But if I do put one on, unwrap, and it hasn't actually made much difference, but occasionally it can, and it can create a lot more sort of level UV. Now you've got, obviously this UV is very different to the other one, but it's more appropriate for what I wanted it for. So that will be more than sufficient for what we need to create our rock texture. And the last thing I'm going to do is, now I know that we're not going to use it anymore, I'm going to just rotate it. We're not going to edit it anymore, should I say. I'm just going to rotate it so that we've kind of got like a base, a flat base. That's probably the flattest one there, yeah. Just center it a little bit, like so. Control and A, apply all, and there's our fairly decent looking rock. Okay, so let's move on to texturing it now. So onto the Texture Paint tab, and we have our PBR Painter all ready to go. And before I do anything else, I'm going to save this as, let's call this Procedural Rock Shoot 01. I've had a few goes at this, just so you know. Okay, so without further ado, let's get on with our layering. So let's start by creating a new layer, a new actual working area. So click on New, set material up for PBR. We don't need to back up or use current material. Click OK, and straight away we'll create a new layer and we'll call this rock texture. This is probably this base texture is really one of the most, if not the most important part of this. If this doesn't look right, then the rest of it won't look good either. So it's about getting a nice color and texture. It doesn't take a lot of work, I have to say. Well, it can do. It depends. Like me, I faff around. It can take a lot of time. But let's go OK, and let's fill that. In fact, let's go color first. Click on base color. Click on the little arrow to bring the options down, and we'll turn this into procedural. We'll leave everything as it is for now and just fill it so we can see what we're doing. You can actually preview this texture on the mesh, but we're going to have to fill it at some point. And so we need some nice rock colors, and it's about really just creating what colors you think are going to work for you here. I don't know why I did that. What I'll do now is I'm just going to mess around and get some nice colors, and this can be any kind of color rock you want it to be, but obviously in this instance I'm going to try and make it look as realistic as possible. So I'm just going to pause the video while I just play around with this and come back with some colors that work. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I'm quite pleased with that. So the next thing to do is to add a normal map, which actually makes this look a lot better. Okay, let's use a procedural, and the first thing I'm going to do actually is go back to the PBR, the original PBR layers, and just make the roughness all the way up so we don't get that shiny yucky look. And we stick with a procedural here. Just change the settings here to make it work. I think it's the detail that helps sell this. I think that looks pretty good. Maybe a bit too much. We can always come back to this. I've left the light and dark as it is. So yeah, I think that works quite well. I'm quite pleased with that. So the next thing we'll do, it's a bit strong, isn't it? Let's just take the strength down. Like I say, we can always come back and play with that. So the next thing I'm going to add is some ridges. I call them ridges, but it's kind of like cracks in the rock, which just kind of make it look a bit more worn and aged, as it were. So let's create a new layer, multi-layer again. Call this ridges. Pretty much everything I'm doing today is going to be done procedurally, except the last layer, which is going to be like a moss layer. You could use procedural colors, and it probably would look just the same. But we'll come to that when we come to that. I'll get to that when we come to that. So ridges, let's start by making a base color so we can see what we're working with. And actually, do you know what, I don't need a base color at all. It's going to be normal, so I'm just going to go on straight to adding in a mask. It's going to be a procedural mask. Go OK, and then just by a preview selected mask on mesh, we can see what we're actually going to work with. So straight away, let's just work with the white and the black points, and let's change the noise texture to Musgrave, and we want kind of large swathes of it to be one color. Just going to move it using the mapping here so I can kind of create kind of losing it somewhere. Okay. And the detail again is the key. Well, no, actually not so much the detail. The lacunarity, I think is the word. And the dimension. In fact, every one of them. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking for. That kind of broken up texture look. Let's see what that looks like when we apply that as a normal. And the way we do that, I just turn off preview selection mask, is we click on normal and then use link to mask. I've just remembered I need to fill it. There you go, that was my problem. I've got little bits of white here as well, which is a bit weird, so I have a feeling go back to my rock texture and refill that. I think that might be a little bit on my UV map. That's a bit weird, I'm not sure, I'll look at that later. Okay, so back to our ridges. Okay, you can see them now. You can see this kind of cracking, what I was looking for with my mask. So if I go back to the preview mask on mesh now, you can see this. I kind of want like a softer edge, so I'm just going to play with the actual ramp settings here. Okay, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So that kind of just cragginess to the rocks, and it just helps to break it up a little bit. In fact, I like it so much, I'm going to see if I can add a bit more. And let's just take just play with the position a little bit, and maybe the scale to make it a little bit more of it. No, that's not working. Okay, that will do. I don't want to break it. I quite like what I've got there. Okay, good. So we'll leave that there, and we'll move on to the next layer now. So for the next layer, we will add some edge wear, which really helps to sell the actual look and believability of the rock. But I have found this is probably one of the tricky ones to get right, because it can look a bit hokey. So this one might take us a little bit longer. Let's make a new layer, call it edge wear. Okay, let's fill it this time straight away. We're not going to see anything, but you can tell we've filled it. I made that mistake last time. And the first thing we'll do is add a new mask, and we'll make this one a geometric mask. And the geometric mask will be a curvature with bevel, which we can't see on Eevees. We have to use cycles. So before I do that, just click on preview selected mask on mesh, go to the render setting, the actual renderer of Eevee, and then pop it onto cycles, for cycles, I beg your pardon. And straight away you can see this mask, which you can see already is giving us quite a nice look. So let's just play with it ever so slightly, and we'll just increase the brightness. You can always decrease it afterwards. Find the bevel samples, you kind of get this kind of crossing over the more samples you have. I think it works better without them actually. Okay, I think that will probably make that work with some extra procedural textures as well. There you go, that's not bad, is it? Okay, so we'll call it a day there, and we will merge that mask so that it turns into an actual texture map, image texture map, and we can use it in Eevee. So let's flatten that one essentially. We'll keep it quite high, 4096, just in case, although, yeah. Okay, so that's just texture baking now. And that's done. Let's turn Eevee off. Oh, sorry. Gosh, put Eevee on. Turn cycles off. And let's go back to have a look at our merged mask again. And we'll call that edge mask. And now we just need to break it up so it doesn't look so uniform by adding a new texture, and we'll make this one a procedural, of course. And preview selected mask on mesh, and with this one here it's just about doing the usual scaling, etc, etc, detail. Let's take the black and white a bit closer together. Okay, and then let's preview them together. Preview mask stack on mesh. And now, using the mask stack color ramp, basically before you do this, what you kind of want is it to be quite a uniform kind of color all over, but a little bit more on the edges here. This is what I found. So once we've got that, then we can rein everything back, and what we tend to be left with is just the edges. And if we need a bit more edge, we can just add, whoops, wrong one. Okay, so we've got a bit too much here, not enough here, but so we need to play a little bit more with this. I think we might have to sacrifice having a bit more here. Let's see. Okay, that's not bad. It's probably too much here, but what we can do is we can actually paint the mask here, this edge mask, and we can erase a little bit just with the eraser. I'm just going to leave it like it is for now, and see what it looks like. Turn preview mask stack on mesh, and at the moment we've got no colour to do it with, so we'll just go on to the painted and make that procedural, and that's just going to be black and white net for the time being. Let's wait for that to redraw, and there you can see it's looking not ideal right now, so we need to just kind of match the colours up more, so we just get a slight feel for this edge wear, and pretty much we kind of copy the colours of the actual texture. So if we go back to that rock texture and we'll copy that, copy procedural setup over to edgeware and paste procedural setup. That's going to look identical now, so you won't notice any difference. So I'm just going to brighten these up until I find somewhere something that looks okay. That's kind of getting there. Let's take the opacity down a little bit. And I quite like that. I think that's kind of, it just needs to be quite subtle anyway. But you could do with being a little bit bigger, couldn't it? So let's add a bit more of the procedural back in. Let's just click on Preview Mask Stack Mesh for a moment. I think that one there. Let's just paint that mask, and let's go to Erase, and let's just have a quick look at the brush settings. Just take the strength right down. In fact, let's do a brush texture on here. Let's do a new one. Leave that as tiled. Do clouds. Where are you? And let's take the contrast up a little bit. Okay, so we should now be able to erase. Let's go back to our layers for a moment. Make sure on the edge mask, and using the paint tool, undo, erase, try again. In fact, let me just double check my settings again. Just do it right down. There we go. So I'm just taking, just taking that brightness down in areas. Where it doesn't need to be quite so pronounced. Whoops, it's funny how that does that. Okay, that'll do. Let's see what that looks like. Let's preview them both again together. Still not quite right. I knew this one. It's always a bit of a challenge to get this right. It's kind of okay. Okay, that's pretty good. I don't mind that at all. It's not quite right, but I think it is definitely going in the right direction. So that's that layer done. Let's move on. The next layer, they're all a bit of a challenge, these ones. I'm going to call this splodges because I don't know what else to call it. But you know, you get that kind of fungus like rings of white patches on rocks. Well, I kind of figured out a way to do that procedurally. Once again, it takes a little bit of faffing, but the actual final result isn't bad at all. So SPLODGES, splodges, a technical term. There is an actual name for it, but I can't remember what it is. So let's fill that, and in fact, to start off with, let's just go to Painted and put Procedural on straight away. Just take a little while to redraw this. So click on Fill, Splodges, Base Color, Procedural, Layers, Fill. Okay, why aren't you filling? Not doing something right. Okay, Paint, not Erase, Fill. There we go. And so we've got just the basic kind of colours, black and white, black to white, which we'll do for now. We will change those shortly. But the first thing we do is we create an edge mask, and it's going to be, they're all going to be procedural on this one, and this is going to be Procedural Splodges. So I'll call this, call this Procedural Splodges, because this particular one is going to be the splodge one. And so we will change this to Voronoi again, and you can see that it gives us these kind of round looking splodges, and you probably know where I'm going with this already. Let's change the scale, taking it down makes them a bit bigger. I think something like that looks pretty good. Okay, that'll do. And so now we just need to kind of clip where they're going to be, so we don't want them all over. So we'll add another procedural mask just to hide it, if you like. So we'll call this we'll make another procedural and call this procedural clip. I was sure I'd rename this one. And you can see already how it's taking shape. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? So, well, it looks pretty good in terms of how it's coming on. So let's preview this one on the selected mesh, and this one needs to be sort of like that kind of cowhide look. So we'll leave it on the noise, take it right down, leave the detail. In fact, that's probably okay as it is. And if we take this blend factor right up and then use the multiply, it will basically hide the where's multiply? We'll hide the black and leave the white. So if we preview that now, you can see that basically we're getting bits of it, but not all of it. Which is exactly what I want. And we can just move those around, a little bit. Let's change the scale to add as well, even a bit bigger. just trying to get it so there's not quite so many of them, and the clip is working, but okay, let's see what that looks like. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. I think that's working quite well. So back to our preview stack on mesh. Just need to noisy up these edges. So finally we'll just add one more procedural preview selected mask on mesh, and this just needs to be plain old noisy again. Preview the mask on the mesh. Okay, that looks kind of quite noisy, dirty like, so that will do I think for now in terms of our splodges shape. And so we just need to create a bit more of a ideal colour for these. At the moment we've just got this procedural black and white, but we kind of need to just work on that a little bit. I think the white's too white. Just needs to be quite subtle. You know, the procedural is not really working. Let's link it to the mask. I think that's a much better idea. Sorry about that, messing you around like that, but it wasn't working. Okay, I'm going to go back to my mask. And just where it's plain white here, just want to try and lose that, sort of lost the detail in the okay, I think that looks better. Whatever it looks like, that's okay. I think that'll do. No, it's a little bit bright now. Yeah, okay, maybe a little bit more on there. Let's just add our procedural clip. Let's just take that back a little bit. Okay, good, that works for me. And then the final thing, I know this is a long tutorial, is the moss. So let's get straight on with it. Let's add a new layer. Let me just save this first. Add a new layer. Moss. We'll do this 2K because we are actually going to use, oh no we're not, or yes we are going to use the actual texture map. So we will actually import the multiple, the various textures we need for this. So we've got color, normal, and roughness. Import multiple textures, and then fill that layer. So we should see the moss come up in a moment. It takes a little while now for my shaders to compile, but there's the moss all over, which actually looks quite good as it is, doesn't it? So what we want is just on the top, base color, textures. So what it's done is it turns on the ones that you need, that are imported. So we've got the base color, the roughness, and the normal. And what we'll do is we'll make it a bit smaller by changing the texture mapping size to say 2. So it's a bit more detailed, maybe even 3. There we go. And it's funny why normally if I fill the whole thing, it would automatically cover it, but it seems to be doing it in bits. But the more I fill it, every time I fill it, that could be because my brush, that's right, my brush is still on the brush texture. If I turn that off, back to layers, and then do it. That will basically what it's doing is doing like a cloud texture, which actually is quite a nice way of I didn't realise it did that. I thought the fill just to use the normal fill, but it was filling it with like a cloud texture, which was actually quite nice. But we want it to be just on the top, so to do that we create a new layer mask, and we will call this, well, not call it, we'll make it a geometric one, and the geometric one we're going to actually use is the normal direction, and we preview that on the mask, on preview selected mask on mesh. You can see that it's basically just using the kind of top or top down. If you drag in here, you can change the angle of the normals. So it's literally just on the top. If we drag this back, we don't want too much. That's okay. So that's our first layer. That kind of shows us where it's going to be. Our next layer is of course going to be the procedural layer, just to break it all up. And we'll preview that on the mask. Preview selected mask on mesh. Just change a few of the settings: scale, detail, just crush this a little bit using the white and black points. Let's preview that on the mesh, and let's rein it in using the, so let's pull all that back, and that looks pretty good to me. I don't even mind these little bits of moss here. That should work quite well. So let's turn preview mask stack off, and there we go. We have our moss on our rock, and just mask multipliers, take that up a little bit, and that looks pretty good. I'm going to call it a day there. And so there is a rock, quite nicely textured, I think, if I may say so myself, in Blender using PBR Painter. I'm going to call it a day there, and hopefully that will be of some use to you. Take care and God bless.